In the culture war, there are no winners, just podcasters. Only a few are willing to risk their lives in the face of some of the dumbest ideas to have ever captured human civilization. Every week, we, Megan Daum and Sarah Hayter, humbly accept this mission to bring you conversations that are equal parts cunning, based, and radically vulnerable. Welcome to A Special Place in Hell. Morning, Sarah.
Morning, Megan. It's almost afternoon for me now.
Oh my God. I have to get up so early to accommodate your schedule. I hope people appreciate this. I had to get up at 6 a.m. It was not even light out.
I get up at 6 a.m. every day. If it's light out when I get up, it's like too late.
Normally I do. I get usually awakened by Hugo at 6:30 demanding to eat, but I had to get up at 6 this morning in order to get ready for this. So I was up before him. Anyway, so God, what a weird week. We can't seem to get away from the horrors.
I'm not interested in, I don't even know what to do because I have like a post that's sitting there in my drafts that I want to publish about the Gaza conflict. And I know if I hit send, I'm going to get all kinds of bullshit. You know, it really feels like 2011 again. You know, it feels like the war on terror times. You know, I'm having some of the same conversations that I had back then, and I'm sick of those conversations. I don't want to ever have those conversations again. I don't want to, you know, like what's great about this podcast is I can talk about something other than Islam, which is what I've been talking about for like a decade. And I'm sick of talking about it. I'm sick of it. And it's the same conversation. You know, you think people learn like some basic things. They never do. Like there's always somebody who doesn't know. Right. And I think it takes a special kind of personality to be able to do what it takes to be a good activist, which is you just say the same obvious thing over and over and over again. And you have to say it with the same, you know, feeling, the same kind of, you know, sense of, you know, I guess you can call it moral righteousness, but like you have to have like something fueling, like some passion fueling it. But the passion wanes because you're bored and you're sick of people and you're sick of having, you know, sick of being labeled or smeared or whatever. And that's happening again. So I'm just, I don't know whether I want to engage, but I might have to step in a little bit. So
are you okay? Can I just ask this? I'm embarrassed to bring this up because I'm very ashamed at my low follower count on Twitter. Like I have real shame about it. I'm embarrassed. I don't understand why it's so low. I mean, I feel like I tweet quite a bit. Well, first of all, my follower count has just been going down, like down in the last year. I mean, beyond, I think, you know, obviously there was a whole shedding of bot-ish followers for everybody. Fine. But, you know, I haven't gotten the blue check because I thought that was cringe. Like, where are we with that? What's cool? What's acceptable?
I think it's still cringe, but I think it's like stupid not to. I always thought it was stupid to worry about whether or not it was cringe because ultimately this is what would happen. Like that's what he was trying to do. He's trying to incentivize getting it, and eventually people are gonna get it. Most people are gonna get it because they want to see the benefits of it.
Okay, so, what are the benefits actually?
I think you are more visible to people.
I'm just not visible. I feel like I tweet something, it goes nowhere.
Yeah. I mean, it's not so much, I think that, I mean, maybe it might be the case that blue checks are like extra visible now. I just think they're more visible in relation because non-blue checks are less visible. So I think that's what it is. But they're like relative to non-blue checkers, blue checks are more visible. So I think you should get it. And I also think that you need to start more fires because your tweets are too like
squish.
Safe.
That's my brand. Safe. Well,
safe. And your brand is not safe. But like the kinds of things you say on this podcast, if you just like cut it into a tweet and put it out there, you'll get dragged every day.
See, I don't have the energy for that. I find getting dragged really enervating. I just can't. Like, I think my last dragging was 3 years ago. I had 2 major draggings in the course of 1 month. And the last one was the infamous PhD gate, that turned into a racial incident. And I got dragged for saying that people with PhDs who are not medical doctors shouldn't call themselves doctor. And apparently that was racist.
Yeah.
So no, but it was horrible. It actually it's still like
you still talk about it. Yeah, I think you still talk about it.
I'm very scarred by it. Yeah, I just don't. It's just I don't know. So it doesn't. I just it makes me, if I get dragged, I get very upset about it and obsessive about it, and then I'm like embarrassed by the fact that I'm so obsessed with it. It's just like, oh my God, get a life.
So the thing is, no one remembers your drags but you, like, except for weirdos, but hardly anyone will remember your drags. Like a year later, no one will remember it. Won't matter, unless it was like truly epic, which is rare. I think that like the ratios that are that bad are pretty rare. Most of us don't remember it. And if you get dragged regularly, you sort of like muddy the waters. Mm-hmm. That's another I think people don't remember my drags as much because I just get dragged every couple of days. Anytime I'm regularly engaging, that's when I will reliably get dragged because I'm going to say something. Oh, well, I think it's fine. I think it's just, you just turn off your phone, put it away, and it's fine. And it just goes away. You just mute all the tweets that started it or any related tweet. Just mute it all and then forget about it.
I don't want to be like that. I just feel like it's just
why?
Because I just feel like it's cheap. If I have something I want to say, I will either write a piece about it or I will say it here. I'm not going to just like drop a bomb and then watch everybody. Yeah, I don't know.
But it's so I tweet when I know I'm not going to write, which is a lot of the times. And I kind of tweet I just don't think about it. Like, to me, it's no different than if I was just to say it to you or to say it to, I would just say it. And I'm just going to say it on Twitter. But people treat Twitter as very different, which is, it makes sense. Like, that's logical. That's how it is different. Like, I am broadcasting to like a small village or actually like a city with my follower count at this point. But it's like, it doesn't feel that way to me. I think I'm just shooting it out. And I also think that some of it is just might be personality difference, because I remember I was talking to a friend who's a very, very careful tweeter. Like, she basically doesn't leave her little bubble, which is a very technical field, and she just doesn't leave it. She doesn't talk about anything controversial even within that field. It's a very, very safe profile. And she just said that she can't take it. Anytime she's gotten pushback, it's haunted her for, weeks, months, like it's just too much. So it's not worth it for her. I think it just doesn't, some of us, it just doesn't haunt as much. I think
I feel like it's
fine.
Yeah, I guess I don't do it because I feel like it wouldn't be representative of what of the bigger picture. Like, I could say something like, oh, it's obvious that women control cancel culture. Women are the cancelers, that there's a baseline sort of mental illness, neurotic narcissism that is you see more often in women, and this has come to dominate the sort of cultural tone. And I would talk about that with you, and I've talked about that with guests on my other show, but somehow tweeting that feels trollish almost. It just does. I just don't want to waste the calories
platform
there.
Is so crazy. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's just it's a crazy platform because it is, the ease of just like engaging is just so, it's just right there. There you go. You can just engage. And because it's contextless, it leads to a lot more drama than otherwise.
Yeah. So I guess it is, it's the opposite of my agenda.
I feel like, well, one, I don't think I think too much about what other people think of me, like, on the whole, for any reason. So it, just makes it easier to deal with. Like,
that's a super
whatever. Like, people. Yeah. I mean, it's a bad thing. It's a good thing. I get haters because I don't like cater to people what they want too much or think too much about how I'm coming across. But the positive is that I don't have to worry about it either.
You don't worry that you're gonna burn bridges, or that you're gonna want to forge alliances in the future, and you don't want to. I mean, not that you're.
I don't think too much about
it.
Really?
Yeah. I kind of. Yeah. A little more mindful of that.
People are so like. I mean, they're unpredictable. You don't know what's going to piss them off anyway. Like, sometimes there are things that I tweet and I feel like some of my friends are going to get mad at me for, and then they don't get mad at me for it, or they say I agreed with that. And it's surprising, it's surprising what you can kind of get away with. I mean, what's interesting is like you could get away with a lot of what you tweet if you said it in person. Actually, you could get away with a lot more, like a lot more crazy things. But that tells you something, doesn't it? That like people punish you more for, I guess, a dragging that's very public, because they're like, oh, now I know I'm not supposed to say that, and I'm not supposed to think that, because everybody else seems to be reacting so harshly to it. For me, it's kind of beneficial because it filters out like the weak, like the people I don't want to engage with anyway, like people who are going to be like really like who are going to see something like that and they're going to behave differently because of it. And I remember when I first started talking about the trans stuff, like that happened a lot. Like there were some people who I knew weren't too far away from my views or were kind of sympathetic, but when they noticed the way that that others in their bubble started to behave, and unfollow me or like quote tweet me or whatever, or talk about me, I noticed they started to like distance themselves or unfollow or move away. And that's the kind of person I actually I don't want in my life anyway. You know what I mean? Like it's just that's the kind of soft, like kind of a weak link that I would prefer not to build bridges with that person or bond too deeply with that person, because there's unless I'm like always mindful of like the exact perfect precise thing that I say, like then I would feel like I could never be honest and have an honest relationship.
No, I hear you. I guess I feel like I want to convince people to come to my side. I want them to think about it. And I guess for me, the best way of doing that is to have it in a more normal human conversational format and sort of invite them in more that way. I think it's for me, it's off-putting, but
you could get away with a lot more in this podcast form. I feel like this is the format that's most forgiving, much more forgiving than writing, much more forgiving, like the most forgiving format, I think, is this.
So I mean, that's why I wanted to do the podcast with you, because I felt like there were things that I wanted to talk about that just were not working, certainly not on social media, but also weren't working on writing. I mean, I think the thing with writing is like, it's much easier to get dragged. You can get quoted more easily and then taken out of context. Although now, if we get big enough, there will be people whose entire jobs it will be to come through our conversations.
Yeah, Sam Harris will still get like people who listen, who only hate
and Joe Rogan
and
too.
Cut out pieces.
Exactly. So
but
we can
still,
that.
If you just take what Joe Rogan has said and put it in put transcripts of it, make them easily available, he would get dragged a lot.
He doesn't
more.
tweet though.
There's definitely he doesn't. He used to. I think he's just sort of left, but he was never a heavy tweeter. I don't think that's his format. I mean, anyway, he's like talking for 3 hours a day, so it's like,
no, I know.
Why would you
tiring.
even need to?
I mean, Sam doesn't tweet either for this reason. Sam Harris left Twitter. Yeah,
and I think so. I just had an intellectual brown web discussion that was just released.
Excuse me while I throw up in my mouth. That's the worst name.
I know.
I
thought it was funny. I thought it was funny.
I know it is funny.
It was a joke.
It sounds like IBS is the problem.
Yeah, I know, which is why I feel like we should keep it, because it's just terrible. It's just a terrible name. But I don't know what else. Razib's idea was Brown Stream, which is so much worse.
Okay, but wait, tell the folks what it is.
I was like, wait a minute, did you hear it? Did you hear what you said? And he's like, But okay, it is a group of us who come together every once in a while, and this is our third recording. There's myself, Razib Khan, who's a geneticist, population geneticist, conservative-ish, atheist. I think he's fully conservative. He's
been on our pod,
and he's an atheist. He's been on our podcast, and he trolls our comments once in a while. And a friend of mine, and Murtaza Hussain, who's a like foreign policy beat writer, journalist at The Intercept. He's like an observant Muslim, and my only like recollections of him were like before this time was just kind of like somebody who dislikes the new atheist movement, and I was part of the new atheist movement. And Shadi Hamid, who is was at Brookings, a senior fellow at Brookings, and now he is at the Washington Post. He's also like a scholar now, more leaning into the writing. Anyway, so the two of them, Shadi and Murtaza, are Muslims, and myself and Razib were not. And it was interesting. We were finding ourselves kind of in a position where we were starting to agree with each other on a lot of things, and that was interesting. So there felt like there was a little bit of a realignment going on, precipitated by some of this like woke BS, but by other shifts too. I think a little bit of it was, but a little bit of it was the just the fact that the war on terror was fading from view, and other issues were coming to the fore, so people who otherwise would have not gotten along very well could come and meet again. So that's why we started to talk, and it's been great talking to those guys. They're all really interesting, really smart, and I enjoy our conversations. I'm sad that we were not able to have them before because of just where we landed on issues. But anyway, this last one was about Israel and Palestine, like the conflict, and it was the most tense one that we've had so far because we did fall on different lines of the conflict. But at the same time, it was just like, it was a really useful conversation. I think we were polite. We were giving each other a lot of charity, which was useful. But Razib decided not to publish the transcript.
Oh.
Yeah. And I thought that was interesting that he made a decision not to. And it was for that purpose, that it's just so much more searchable. And I wonder how is this distorting our discourse, that so much of our conversation is had in this text form that's very visible to people, that's searchable, that's findable, that's permanent. There are some really interesting books that have been written about it, about how this shift over to a discourse that is text-based is like messing with our minds, messing with our ability to think. Sometimes probably in some good ways, but in many bad ways too. But one of the ways is that you can't delete yourself. You can't, thoughts that would have just come out and in person and floated away,
right,
are going to haunt you for the rest of your life.
I can't imagine. And then people end up doubling down, because what are you going to do? I mean, then you have a decision. If you say something half-baked and it gets out there, you can either apologize, you can either recant your statement and apologize and then you look weak, or you can double down and then you look like an idiot.
Yeah, I mean, why wouldn't so many of what we said, so many things that we say are half-baked all the time. You know what I mean? But now it used to be that there's the things you published, right, which were not half-baked, right, and the things you said, which were, of course, it was a thought experiment. Half-baked.
You just said this with your friends. I mean, that was the thing. You would get together with your friends and I'd be like, hey, what do you think of this? This is an idea I just had. Or if you were a writer, you would have that conversation with your editor, ahead of time, and then figure out what to write.
You would bake it right over the that's and the process of baking a thought, taking it from the realm of I'm just playing around with this to feeling solid enough about it to write it down, has a lot. I mean, it's a process. It's a process of verbalizing it, getting feedback from other people, from the world.
That step.
And now we've eliminated it, and the feedback is Twitter, and that's crazy. Right. So it must be the case that that our discourse is terribly damaged, by our inability to get the ideas from that one place, or where they're just soft putty to fully baked. I think it's fascinating. I have a lot of thoughts about it. We can make a whole podcast on this because there's some interesting readings, some interesting people have been thinking about it, writing about it. I don't love it. So I try to push back on that by doing what I do on Twitter, what I do all the time. So refusing to not play around with ideas. And I refuse to be held to something that I said 2 years ago, mm-hmm. because I'm not held to it when I just speak.
Yeah.
So why would I be held to it?
I mean, playing. So, yeah.
but I totally see why people think it's a different thing, and why, they refuse to engage. I think Twitter's probably going to die. It just feels like.
Really? Can you imagine?
The management is really bad.
You really are a nihilist. You say the institutions are going to die. You say the universities are going to die. Now Twitter, that is a bridge too far.
Twitter's going to die.
Right.
I think
you are fully on the side of the demons.
I mean, half of me thinks it would be great. Half of me thinks it would be terrible if it died.
It would have to be replaced by something else. Like,
would it?
I mean, what would the
what did you do before
chattering
Twitter
class do all day? Well, you know what? Actually, I would talk to my friends. I can't believe the amount of time. I mean, if I was like writing or I had a thought or like this will blow your mind. If I didn't know the answer to something, I would like call somebody who would and be like, "Hey, can I ask you this?" And like they would be at work, and I would just call them, and they would answer the phone. Like you would cold call them and interrupt them, and they would be totally normal. Like,
and then it's like a 45-minute conversation.
yeah,
It's fine.
how did
Yeah.
anything ever get done? Like the amount of time we wasted, like shooting the shit.
We didn't wait because we're wasting it now.
No, I know exactly.
We are still wasting that time. We're just wasting it in a very inhumane.
But it was like you would call somebody who knew. Like, oh, I need I need even like statistics. Like I would like because you couldn't get online. So you would call somebody like, hey, you are a lawyer who specializes in this. Can you tell me blah, blah, blah? And they would say, sure. And you would talk to them for 20 minutes. Anyway, enough reminiscing. I want to talk about a piece that was in the Washington Post over the weekend about our favorite subject, gender identity. This blew my mind. This has to do with somebody named Artemis Langford, who is a trans-identified biological male identifying as female, student at University of Wyoming, wanted to join a sorority, got into the sorority somehow. It's Kappa Kappa Gamma, and okay, like we could talk about the reality of this situation. What is apparent is that this person is an AGP, an autogynephile, which we can explain more about that later. But just that means that's the categorization for somebody who is biological male who is sexually aroused by the idea of themselves as a woman, and this is a very common subset of trans-identified people. So this person,
and this is our diagnosis. This is not like,
it's our diagnosis,
they would not
okay,
call
but
themselves
I mean,
that, but it's obvious.
Pretty obvious.
It's obvious.
Okay,
it's
so
obvious. I refuse to listen to people who would like not.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna lay. I'm gonna lay out like what the facts as I see them first. Okay, so this person, 22 years old or something like this, 6'3", very large person, huge, not, high 200s in the pound.
Huge for a guy.
Yeah,
like huge for
even
a male.
for a guy. So was, at the University of Wyoming, community was the LGBTQ plus community. Apparently decided that, and I'm just going to say he, just for the sake of clarity, and we can talk more later about why we're doing that, decided that he wanted to be in this sorority, and they sort of let him in, but said he could not live in the sorority house, but was just really like hanging around, just being sort of odd. This person is on the autism spectrum. It did not start having gender issues until like middle school age. But this person has like a 5 o'clock shadow, doesn't appear to be taking any cross-sex hormones whatsoever. This is like basically a man in a dress hanging around the sorority house, allegedly getting erections, watching the girls, having inappropriate conversations with them, just making them feel extremely uncomfortable.
Not having actually a lot of conversations.
No, yeah, just kind of like
mostly just
off
around
to the
and
side.
staring.
Yeah. And these are nice girls, so they're trying to be accommodating. I guess the sorority world has been captured by social justice ideology as well, because the bylaws and of these sorority chapters are pretty generous toward trans identities. And anyway, they ended up filing a lawsuit because this person was making them feel so uncomfortable. And then this person ended up getting very much harassed on the campus, in pretty ugly ways. So that was really unfair and sad to see. But in any case, like was not backing down. And ultimately, a couple months ago, the judge threw out the case so that the girls were not able to sue. And there was a gigantic feature in the Washington Post over the weekend about Artemis Langford and how terrible this is for this person and how they have been victimized. And this is an example of the rampant transphobia on campuses, and especially in places like Wyoming. Laramie, Wyoming is where, of course, the Matthew Shepard killing took place in 1998. I just, and of course, there's a lot to that story that people don't realize. Anyway, I found this human interest feature astonishing in its credulity, like absolutely amazing, because anybody would read anybody with a shred of objectivity and like the slightest knowledge about the new gender movement would see exactly what's going on, which is what I just explained. And yet this has been presented as like a hero's journey. And this person is an underdog, and how stunning and brave that they have endured this abuse.
Yeah. I mean, I think I had the same reaction, although I was a little bit more, I felt as if it was very much a crafted narrative, and whoever's writing this, I don't know much about William Wan.
Yeah, William Wan. He's an enterprise reporter at the Post. I mean, he says he's focused on narrative and high impact stories. He writes often about mental health and people suffering on the margins of society.
I mean, my God, this person is not to be trusted. Like
the reporter. This is not,
what reporting? This was not a report. This was a fictionalized. This was like based on a true story, and turned into a Lifetime movie, and it's barely based on anything real. Every aspect of this piece was like propaganda, and it was written to have the most maximum, like the kind of like extreme emotional impact. Only on one side, right? Like only on, and I can't even read some of it. The morning sky was still dark. This is how it starts.
There were some beautiful photographs.
As Artemis Langford's, the morning sky was still dark as Artemis Langford's father hoisted the last of her belongings into her car for the drive back home. Be safe, he told her. I will, she promised. But it's just so, even like, your dad is lifting all the things into the car.
I know.
Because you're a teeny weeny little girl and you can't do it on your own. Okay, maybe, sure.
Here's a little bit from where we hear about how Artemis got the idea for being in a sorority. Okay, as a freshman, Artemis had listened to a friend describe life in a sorority. It sounded nothing like the movie stereotypes of keg parties and elaborate hazing. Her friend talked of being supported through tough times, helping philanthropic causes, finding a forever home she could rely on for the rest of her life. Artemis remembers dismissing the idea with a laugh. Well, no sorority would ever have a trans person, she said. Mine would, her friend quickly replied. For weeks, Artemis couldn't shake that vision of a, quote, forever home. We should say that to me, the villain of this story is this friend who said mine would, right there.
Yeah.
That is an enabler who is living in a magical reality. And clearly, there's no evidence that this friend is a member of that sorority.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure she's not. And then there's also another, I don't know if this is the same friend. There's a picture of Artemis and a female friend who I don't think is, I'm not sure if it's this person.
Is
definitely not
doesn't seem to. There are no, all the Artemis's allies in the sorority are anonymous, so it's hard to know how many there are. Meanwhile, the people who oppose Artemis started off a little bit more anonymous, but now, since there was a lawsuit filed by members of the sorority, they have become they're public about it. So it seems as if it seems as if the majority of the sorority sisters are not interested in having this person as a part of their group. And it just, it's unbelievable that it ever happened to begin with, and then that this it would be covered in this way, in this extremely like, yeah, credulous way, but I think false. They're making up a narrative, they're making up a story. It's it's extremely biased.
Well, it's just so it's incurious, and it's just completely lacking in context. It's like, okay, let me just read a little bit more. So I think it's telling that Artemis, decided to pursue the sorority thing after having seen that, there was there was some tragedy and then some difficulty in the LGBTQ plus community there. So she said, her social circle at University of Wyoming at the time, before she got into sorority, skewed heavily toward other LGBTQ plus students. Just weeks earlier, one of them, a fellow transgender student, had killed himself. Artemis was among the first to discover the body in the dorm and called 911. Soon after, another friend attempted suicide but survived. Artemis had tried taking her own life too as a child and teenager. Now her LGBTQ plus community in Laramie, fragile to start, was fracturing. She hungered for the support her sorority friend had described. Okay, so this is so telling, because she's set herself up as Artemis has set, I'm just going to say themselves up, I don't want to be confusing, as a victim. So like, she's already teed up to go into this sorority and have it be very hard for anybody to oppose her. And it's like this kind of weaponization of victimization is exactly the kind of thing that we see all the time. Another thing that really bothered me about this story is the way that the resistance to Artemis belonging to the sorority is framed totally as like a right-wing kind of reaction, as some kind of like, conservative, bigoted response. So in fact, the whole way it got kicked off that she was in there was because the mother of a current member of the sorority had accidentally sent an email intended for the Kappa alumni to somebody else. So the mother, the mother was begging alumni of the sorority to object to Artemis's induction. She says, "I'm writing to you as a concerned parent," the email began. "The chapter has extended a bid, open recruitment, to a, all caps, transgender," and then she says in parentheses, "born male that is still a man, individual, and he has accepted today." The mother continued, "I don't know where you sit morally on this subject, and I am not homophobic. However, a, all caps, sorority designed in the 1800s as an all caps, all women club is caps, not the place for any man or a person who is born female. That is what fraternities are for." So this piece sets up this mother as like some kind of Jerry Falwell church lady villain. And other than the all caps, which never does anybody any favors when you go back and read something, this is
Always
a completely logical response. I highly doubt that this woman is homophobic or even transphobic. She sees what's going on and she said something about it, which anyone would do. So a shame on this reporter for framing this up this way. Makes me really mad.
Yeah, I mean, even the adjectives used for Artemis the whole time, it's, she said something, "I wish it didn't matter to me, all the things they said, how they painted me like a mannish freak," Artemis said quietly, like that.
Yeah.
Like it like as if it's just this poor, like the whole narrative is so crafted so carefully to give you a perception of this person, which even the photographs that are included make it clear cannot actually be what is happening.
I wonder if
these very threatening sorority sisters who are terrorizing this poor young trans person, and it just doesn't add up. It cannot possibly be that that's the facts on the ground. There's a piece at the end where the girls eventually lose their lawsuit.
Yeah, they lose the lawsuit. It's like an 84-year-old judge who basically says that the sorority chapter is still identifying woman as anybody who identifies as a woman. So therefore, based on that legal definition, there's nothing he can do. I mean, it sounded to me like he was just like this 84-year-old guy who's like, I give up. I don't want. I can't. Like, I don't want to have anything to do with this. But I mean, here's another.
But that it makes sense. It makes sense if that's how you're defining it. Then that is what I mean.
It's
sororities
like
will have to define things
you guys. Exactly. It's like this is what happens when you decide to go along with these redefinitions. Okay, so here's another thing that drives me crazy. So this is in the piece. Within weeks, Artemis's name was making the rounds on conservative news outlets. There was a piece in the National Review. I know the sorority girls, they went on Megyn Kelly at some point. So, okay, one of those outlets called Artemis a trans-identified biological male. Ooh. Another, the National Review, quoted an anonymous Kappa sister saying she felt pressured by leaders to vote Artemis in. The magazine described Artemis as a, quote, tall, heavier man with facial hair, and quoted the anonymous sister saying that he, quote, has made no efforts to physically look like a girl. Okay, is that a smear campaign? Those are facts. Those are simply facts.
That's real. That's what's real. That's what's incredible about it is that you can't point out the reality as it is, because that is hateful. It is, and that's why you have to lie. That's why you have to craft this, these descriptions of Artemis running in fear from fleeing in fear from the dormitory at times, and collapsing on her bed, when feeling hopeful for the first time, dreaming of being accepted.
Drama.
This is how it ends. Still alone in her dorm room, she started yelling with relief and excitement. Okay, still alone in her room, she started yelling with relief and excitement. So that's a weird thing for even like a young woman to be doing, yelling with relief and excitement. But it is the picture is different. When I think of like, a 5'1", little like 21-year-old girl like running, squealing, I mean, it's silly, weird, like odd for somebody at that age to be doing, like a 12-year-old girl. A 12-year-old girl yelling with relief and excitement. Okay, I guess if you're 21, I guess you can do that at a Taylor Swift concert, but otherwise it's not allowed. Like you can do that evidently at a Taylor Swift concert, but this is a 6'3", like enormous, like very heavy set person. I just felt like I was being gaslit. I'm reading this piece. I'm just being
It's beyond gaslit. It's almost like a joke. It's almost like some kind of psychological experiment to see who's going to fall for this. I even wonder if the photographer was like a little bit like trolling us a little bit, because the photographs are just so clearly, this is a man. I mean, there's no effort.
But the thing is, I think there was effort. Like there was effort put into making this person look as feminine and dainty as
in
possible,
the photographs,
and non-threatening as possible. This is what happens with the effort put in. That's what I'm trying to say. Is that it? The reality is probably worse.
She has giant hairy forearms. I mean,
and it's just incredible.
I mean, the whole thing is also not mentioned is that her GPA wasn't nearly high enough to qualify for the sorority, so somehow they made an exception for that. And
and there's no doubt if you actually had a biological female that had the same, like keep everything else the same but make this person a biological female, they would not.
Oh, no way. You can't be, you got to be hot. I mean, I don't know about this particular sorority on this campus.
This particular sorority, it's not one of the most, I looked them up a little bit, and it didn't seem like the kind of sorority that has like the very perfect, like blonde, super skinny kind of sorority girls. But still, I think this person is still an outlier. And would have, it's hard for me to believe that they would get in. Into a sorority.
Well, and my feeling was like, okay, well, you want to be a girl? Congratulations. This is how girls get treated. They get stabbed in the back by other girls and not allowed into sororities. So
yeah,
well played.
Nothing about this. The narrative makes sense. I want a second home. I just want to be accepted. At least once, I think maybe more than once, but at least once there's a description of Artemis as somebody who doesn't like a lot of attention, like doesn't try to get a lot of attention. And it's like everything that this person is doing, everything that they are doing is pointing to the fact that they don't care about having a forever home. Like, if everyone doesn't want you, then leave. What would a woman do? You know, if people just don't want you there, you're not going to just be like, oh, let me go on in anyway. Let me put a loss.
A trans man wouldn't do it. I mean, it's always trans women, if you notice, that are stirring things up. It's always biological men.
I remember reading quite a long time ago this really interesting piece about biological females who transitioned and became trans men and then detransitioned, and they were talking about why they transitioned, why they thought they were male. I think all of them were lesbians in this piece. There was like 3 or 4 people covered, and they were all lesbians, and they were just like, like kind of tomboys their whole lives. And there was a narrative, and they just like sort of fell for it, and then they realized that wasn't them. And what was interesting about it is, since many of them had been taking testosterone, they started to look and sound like men, and that's it's a really interesting the way these hormones work, because it seems like estrogen can soften up the features of a biological male, but it doesn't make you pass on its own. It can't make you pass because testosterone has had some permanent effects, and you can't go back when it comes to whatever it has, given to you. And it seems like detransitioners who are biologically female and who are trying to like overcome the effects of testosterone have a much tougher time. Sometimes there's things that they just can't do. They can't reverse their voices.
They can't get their voices back often.
They can't get their voices back. Even with voice training, they kind of they say sometimes that they sound like trans
they can't have
women,
reverse Elizabeth Holmes vocal training.
Yeah, they say I've heard more than one detransitioning like female, like biological female, say this, that people think that she is a trans woman, that she is a biological male trying to pass as a woman. Oh
my God, the irony!
Because of the permanent effects of testosterone. But what's interesting is that these detransitioners, I've seen it again and again, and I saw it in this piece that was covering that they were talking about how when it comes to the bathroom issue, they felt uncomfortable using the women's room because they could tell that other women were like upset by their presence
because they thought they were
because they thought they were men.
They were men,
and they were upset. And they didn't want to upset the women. Right. They didn't want. They knew what was going on in the woman's head and why, and they didn't want to do this to her. Which is, I was like, that's how you know you're a biological woman. Like this is the proof that you're a biological woman when you take other people's, like when you take these feelings into account, you can relate to them, you can empathize with them, you might even remember feeling the same way, before the transitioning business, and you accommodate them. You make yourself uncomfortable. Like they were also saying that they're uncomfortable using the mail rooms, but they do it anyway sometimes because they don't want to make women
I just
uncomfortable.
think they should build more bathrooms. That's the solution.
It's such a female thing to do that, to say, I don't want to make other people uncomfortable, I will make myself uncomfortable.
And that's also what leads to these women being victimized. I don't want to make somebody uncomfortable by rejecting them.
It's the trans women who are like, no, you need to be comfortable. I don't care about your comfort. I care about my comfort. My comfort is that I'm in here and everybody else needs to accommodate me. And I just cannot, you see the pattern again and again and again and again. And it's hard to deny. Every once in a while, you'll have like a female, biological female who's transitioning, who will also be very, who will also push boundaries of other groups like gay men, and sort of force inclusion, but it's rare. It's like just such a rare thing to see. Meanwhile, all the time I'm uncomfortable. Like I can't, because I think that's
part of the fetish. Like I feel like so the wanting to have female characteristics and wanting to have a sort of cartoonish version of the female experience includes wanting to feel like a victim, because that's part of being a woman. So if I walk down the street and I think everybody's going to attack me or I'm going to be raped, that's part of the fantasy of performing womanhood. And it's so perverse. I mean, and the other thing too is like this kind of mentality where women and girls are told to accept trans identifying biological males without question. It's denying their basic survival instincts. Like, these things are totally at odds. Bridget Fetisi talks about this really eloquently. It's like, for a long time, women were told, trust your instincts, know how to get out of a situation. In fact, a lot of people like us were saying, like, hey, it's your responsibility in part to like know when is a bad situation and get out of it, and don't worry about being a nice girl. And if you go along with it and you don't say no, it's going to be a lot harder to make a case that you were violated. Okay. So we've got that school of thought. But at the same time, now we're saying, well, if it's this kind of person, then you need to question your instincts and you need to interrogate yourself and ask why you're feeling threatened and question whether or not that's because you're a bigot. And like, these two things are totally at odds and so destructive.
They're taking place. There's a reason that this entire battle is taking place in women's spaces, in sororities, in women's bathrooms and women's changing rooms and women's sports. Like, this is like, there's a reason that that this is taking place the way it is. And it tells you something about the reality of the sexes and why we have women's like spaces to begin with, why we need that, because there are enough men out there. And it doesn't need to be, I don't think it's the majority of men. I don't think the majority of men are creeps. I don't think the majority of men want to prey on women. They want women to want them, and might be like have sexual impulses that we don't have.
True predators, the majority of women are not
rare.
Like that. I mean,
they're rare. It's like 5 out of 100.
Yeah, and
right?
men can act badly under the right circumstance. I mean, it's a spectrum of bad behavior, but yeah.
Right. But so what society has to do is make it as hard as possible for predatory men to get what they want, to prey on women. That's what society is supposed to do. That's what Western society has done exceptionally well when you look at like what's happening globally. The Muslim world has a way of dealing with this as well, which is just partition the sexes entirely, keep women under, keep them so totally separate and so totally out of the public space that they cannot be that they can't move around freely because they could be in danger. That's one way of handling it. Another way of handling it is to put the responsibility and the onus of it on men. That's what we do in the West, and we allow women a lot of freedoms. And then in certain places, like locker rooms, like like bathrooms, we allow women privacy because we realize that this is actually a very important thing, that women need to be able to access public spaces reliably, using the restroom, like do a human thing, which is eat and go number 2 or whatever in public.
Wait.
So that you can actually fully
what?
So that you can fully participate in the public space.
Are you? I don't.
I mean, I don't.
You're in the intellectual brown web, but so I don't know.
Okay, that's all we're doing.
I know,
but we do it intellectually. Okay,
we are 2 girls, 1 pod. If anybody catches that reference.
All right. Okay. But it is part and parcel of being able to be a weaker, the weaker sex, and I mean physically, and the one that is and the one that gets impregnated, to be able to access a space where they can change, where there is an expectation that there will not be any biological males in there, and this whole idea of like, oh well, we've always, men have always been able to walk in there. It's like, if that was the case, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. We're having it because men can't do it.
I just want to say one more thing about this, which is that the same crowd who is all about zero tolerance for any man who comes anywhere near close to threatening a woman, it's always believe women. It's always err on the side of, well, he was violent. You've got Brett Kavanaugh and Christine Blasey Ford. Never mind that neither of them remember exactly what happened. we err on the side of believing her. That same crowd, if a trans identified person is in the mix, the logic is completely reversed. It's, oh no, don't believe the woman. You give all the credence to this other person because they are marginalized. I mean, I guess it's believe marginalized people is what it is.
Yeah. I don't think you should necessarily believe anyone. We don't have, I mean, I don't need to believe anybody to know that it is reasonable to presume that people who are much larger, much stronger, sexually, like have sexual impulses that are more intense, who can impregnate, but not be impregnated. It just, I don't need any, that's all I need to know, that sex exists, and the other sex who has the opposite problem, that they might need to be separated in some conditions. Like I don't need to believe women, actually. Like I know that they are vulnerable. It is true. It is a fact that they are vulnerable. It doesn't matter whether they think it or don't think it. It is true that if you're in a place where you're being undressed, that where you are undressing, you are in a vulnerable situation, and it makes sense to have this kind of partition. It doesn't mean that no predator will ever make it into, a women's locker room, just that they won't be able to get away with it as easily and openly, because the second they're walking in, we see it. A man just walked in. Right. Like look at what just happened. You can point to it. So this gets to the passing thing, because I remember when we had that conversation with Kathleen Stock, like she felt that the line was just that it's material sex. I think it's like a little bit more complex than that. And I think passing matters, in the sense that I think passing successfully does tell you something about the danger that person presents to women. And I'm not saying that this should be legal. I'm thinking that before this whole conversation was everywhere and we were talking about trans rights, obviously people who passed went into the bathrooms that they wanted. Like, obviously that happened all the time. But the reason we're having this discussion, the whole reason we're having this discussion, has nothing to do with passing people, because they've always done what they wanted. It's the ones who do not pass that we are talking about. It's the so-called rights of the people who don't pass. When we are talking about whether or not trans women or trans men need to be let into the bathroom of their choice, we are talking about non-passing.
I know, but that's
in actuality, passing people have
passing because they have passing privilege,
because they pass, right? But I think it's not privilege. It's kind of like, I mean, it's a terrible thing to invoke, but I think there's a little bit of like a don't ask, don't tell kind of a rule that I don't entirely disagree with, partially because we know that there are many things that motivate, especially with biological males. We know that there are many things that motivate transition. AGP is just a big factor, and we have to.
And that's we should say that is a subset.
It's real.
I don't even know that it's ever. I don't know that it's the majority. It probably is.
AGP.
AGP is probably the majority of men who transition in middle age, and a lot of them are not gay. I mean, AGPs tend to not be gay.
It's growing.
So people should understand that.
It's growing in younger. AGP is more common in younger men now because of porn,
right?
Mostly.
Yes,
but it seems like there's an effective porn on there.
But we should be clear that they are not, like, Artemis was attracted to women. At no point did Artemis say that they were attracted to men. Like, this person was getting aroused among the women, which is why they wanted to be in that place. So yes.
Autogonophiles are almost always entirely attracted to women prior to their transition. Then afterwards, things might be different, but that's part of the, it can be part of
often the fetish. They stay with their
to
wives.
Then continue to date. Yes. But it's before transition, they're almost always they're straight guys who transition, and I think that when we're talking about like the smaller subset of trans people who are gay, whose transition I oppose in a more philosophical sense, like in the sense that I think we should allow gay people should feel more comfortable in their skin, and we should create a social environment where gay boys and gay girls like feel more comfortable in their skin, are accepted for who they are, and that should be how we deal with homosexuality. Like, but that's a preferred way of dealing with homosexuality. Like, as far as I'm concerned, I know that makes me a bigot today, but if you let's go back to the 2000s, there must have been like early 2000s, there must have been some amount of transitioners who passed, and some amount of biological men who passed and who were using women's restrooms. But then you have to think about who that person is. What's the chances they were AGP? Slim to none, because AGPs just don't, they do not pass regularly. It is very rare to see an AGP that even kind of passes. It's hard for non-AGP trans women to pass. It's very hard for them to not pass or to pass, just because testosterone does certain things to you. There's only so much you can do.
Bathrooms were they using though? Were they just sort of not out in public? I'm trying to think
for AGPs.
Yeah, like AGPs.
I think they were just cross-dressed.
Right, they were just cross-dressing
in private,
and then would they go into the men's? Yeah, I mean, I don't recall seeing
and then they would go to the
public space, go into a restroom. I don't know. Yeah,
I've never seen before this more like this trans era. I've never seen anybody who never passed in a woman's space. Like, I had never seen that happen. You could say that I wasn't looking for it, but this is I'm saying somebody's 6'5" in a woman's space. Like, that's what I'm talking about. Like
Artemis is 6'2" and 260
like sticking out like a sore thumb kind of people.
To be clear.
And I think that by the time you pass, like, for the people that pass, the reason I say that there could be a little bit of lenience, a little bit of like, okay, I'm not looking, like, I'm going to pretend that I don't see what I see necessarily, is because I think it says something. It says something if you are able to pass. It's not merely like access to surgeries and stuff, which is part of it, like surgeries and hormones, like that is definitely part of it. But another part of it is just like mannerisms, like the way also your body
type. I mean, but that's why it's not fair. I mean, somebody like Blair White just passes beautifully, not only because of surgery, but just she has that kind of body type.
Blair White has let's think about what Blair White, like that's one condition, that Blair White is smaller, Blair White was a gay man prior to transition, so not sexually interested in women. These two factors alone mean Blair White is not a danger to women in the way a 6'3" straight dude, like former straight dude, now transbian or whatever, and that matters to me. It matters to me that Blair White is not a danger to me in the bathroom, but the AGP clearly is, like, and I wonder if because Blair White is used as an example, like it's used as a cudgel, like I'm even comfortable with the pronouns with Blair White, because there's a truth of it, but in terms of accommodating someone's preferences, like that's my choice. That's something I feel comfortable doing in some cases and uncomfortable doing in other cases. When there's a sexual element involved, where it's a fetish for you to hear me say she, and I know that that's the case, then I'm not going to do it. I'm never going to do it. If I suspect someone's an AGP, I'm not going to do the she thing, because I'm not participating in your sexuality. I'm not going to do it. I don't consent. Right. I don't consent. I don't consent to it. So I'm not going to do it. But if I feel strongly that this person is not an AGP, often that is the case with the people who are homosexual and then transition, like Blair White. It's pretty obvious when that's the case. They're also not a danger to me in the same way, and I don't mind treating them differently. But we can't, because Blair White is used to let this person in,
Okay, but here's the problem.
If you were checking genitals, you would not let Blair White in, so you have to let this guy
what do we do with somebody who is not AGP, but who just is a very tall, big male and wants to transition? And this is what the youth transition is all about. I mean, this is what the inconvenient truth of all of this is, that the only argument to me for putting a kid on puberty blockers, and then transitioning them or making any kind of medical intervention before 18 is because it's going to help them pass.
They might pass.
That's why they care. Otherwise, we could say, just cool your jets, wait till you're 18. It's not going to kill you. And
I don't think that's why they care. I think that's why they say they care.
I think that's probably what is in their mind. But I think that's like, oh my God, I know I'm this way, and every day my body is going in the opposite direction than I want it to go. I do understand the logic of that.
I think that might be the case of people who are like themselves trans, but I think that the reason that child transition is like transition of minors is being pushed so heavily by transgender activists has to do more with like this justifies the full narrative that this is something you're born with, that this is something you can't do anything about. Like, and I think that's the reason children are so important in this narrative. But I agree with you that one of the side of like, right. But with as you know, if I was like a 17-year-old, you know, trans identifying like female or whatever, I don't know, these terminologies just it's so confusing. But if I was trans, yeah, I can see that I would want to just get on board as quickly as possible so that I can masculinize as much as possible. That makes sense to me, you know. But I just think that why can't we be honest about the fact that the people who we're worried about is the AGPs?
Because AGP doesn't exist, don't you know?
You know, if we could just say it, if we could just verbalize
I think
it,
people don't know what it is.
We're worried about. We're not worried about trans men. We're not worried about females who transition. You know, I mean, and then this is separate from the harm that trans people might be bringing on themselves through the process of transition, or the harm that might be befalling minors if their puberty is suppressed. That's a separate conversation. I'm talking about the harm that they pose on others, you know, like the rights of others that are being infringed. Why can't we be honest that it's haunted it's AGPs
by the specter of all gay people are sexual predators? We are so haunted by the sort of abuses, you know, of this gay civil rights movement that we just can't get past it. I mean, I know super intelligent, educated people, some gay people too, by the way, that have no idea what AGP is. They don't know what it is. It's verboten. I think if you don't know the gender movement, it doesn't exist. I mean, you're basically they deny the existence of it.
Like, doesn't it, like, because to me, it was when I first heard about the term, it was like, oh, because it was like what I had been seeing. You know, I had in my mind, I had been dividing trans women into like naturally feminine people who actually kind of act like gay men, you know, still, even after transition, they kind of do the gay man thing. Like it's, who's that other one who you were just talking about?
Well, Dylan Mulvaney. Well,
Dylan Mulvaney. Dylan Mulvaney to me is like, this is a campy little twink. You know what I mean? Like that's who this person is.
Us, but yeah, right.
But that's how that's one half of it. Those are some of them, you know. And then there's others where you feel like Caitlyn Jenner, where you're like,
Caitlyn Jenner admits that she's AGP, like, does she not?
You just have right.
Yeah, I think so. Does she not?
I don't know. I mean,
Caitlyn Jenner spoke out against Artemis Langford. And was like, no, this is totally unacceptable. This person should not be in a sorority. I mean, there are
very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of trans women who identify as autogyne. Debbie Hayton in the UK is
who'll just say so.
Like,
there's
some, and I think it's great.
An incredible amount of honesty.
Explains what it is, and everybody, if you don't understand autogynephilia, I encourage you to look up Debbie Hayton. She's like a normal person. She's a science teacher or something in the UK, and she was married to a woman. And
so it's interesting you're using the pronouns.
I'm okay, whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's fine. I'm not judging. I just think it's interesting.
Yeah, you're right. It is totally arbitrary.
Like, it's interesting where you're drawing the line. But for me, it's like I don't participate in the AGP-ness. I won't participate.
Yeah.
And I have, like, I know a lot of AGPs, like, personally. I've more, because I have just like a lot more male friends in general. And like they're like nerdy types, you know, like the kind of person who might fall into AGP. I know more AGPs than I know of trans women who would have like been gay men.
Really?
Like,
do you talk to them about this? Do they recognize that they are?
No, I can't talk about it. But sometimes, you know, I can't. I mean, it's complicated. But to me, it was always clear that there were differences in why somebody was, you know, motivated to start identifying as a woman, and they behaved differently. Like, it was very clear the behavior was different. Everything about them was different, and that led to better passing in some cases, and more intuitively, just like my reptile brain is not fearful. Mm-hmm. In some you know, like with some trans women, and then but fearful in others, you know, like my reptile brain says this is fine, This person's not going to attack you. But then in other cases, this is strange. This is, be on your guard and be looking around. And I think that when we're going back to like this female intuition thing, like there's, the people have talked about it for many years, that women are more comfortable with being around gay men, and even like being, unclothed in front of gay men.
I'm not, because I always feel like they're judging me. I feel like gay men are like, oh, she's so bad with fashion.
Oh, I've never felt too in like one way or another about it, like very strongly. But I do feel very strongly about straight men, like seeing me undressed. I feel very strongly about that. And I that same sort of intuition, sense of danger radar in our heads that has developed over millions of years is still around. Mm-hmm. And it's telling us to be fearful in some respects, but we're not allowed to articulate it. We're not allowed to say why.
It's so weird.
It disgusts me that we can't
really
talk about
the weirdest thing going.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
Do you think it's going to, I mean, it seems like now that you see this kind of post on Washington Post, that it's gonna get worse. Like I just think it's so gonna get worse until we address the AGP elephant in the room, until we start talking about it openly and saying there are some people who are motivated by sexual arousal. That is what they're doing, and that change. And so women intuit this.
Yeah.
A lot of the women who are pushing back against it intuit this. They can feel it. They can see it in their eyes. When you're talking to them,
it needs to be taught in health class. It needs to be part of the curriculum. Like, this is what you need to know about sexuality and biology, and this is how you protect yourself. We're not saying that AGP people shouldn't exist. I think they're not all. I mean, the number of AGP people who are predators is very small. By the way, we're not talking about like 100% of these people are predators. This is a subset, and within that, there's a subset that is going to do these things.
They don't even have to be predators. First of all, I would just say that there is some evidence. I could pull it up at another time, but there is some evidence that more like trans identifying males are predatory than the standard like male population, based off of like prison records in the UK.
But how many of them are saying that they're trans in order to get into women's prisons? I'm not sure. That's but they're not really.
Which way is the causation? Right. But regardless, it doesn't matter for us, does it? Because we're just talking about like if we from our perspective as potential victims, how should we be approaching these two populations of just males and then males who identify as females? That's what I'm talking about. But I feel like I'm losing my train of thought. What was I saying?
Well, I was just saying that not all AGP people. I just think people need to understand. What this is.
Not right. Like more, even if they aren't. It is true, and I think there's some AGP commentators that were pushing back on this the last time we discussed this. That were saying that it's not as if I'm aroused 100% of the time, like walking around, like it's not always part of a performance. And now that I've been dressing this way for a long time, it's just more comfortable, and I look more feminine. It's just more comfortable. Like this is my norm now. So I'm not going around turning everything into a fetish, and that might even be the case. That's fine. It's just that I can't tell, from where I stand when it is or isn't part of a fetish. And I refuse to participate in it, period, at any point in time, and so I don't want to take on that risk. I'm not interested in the, like, I guess the way to phrase it is, I mean, let me ask you this question. If you could know for a fact that someone is AGP, and that this could be like the point at which we say, no, you're not, you can't have this identity, would you be more comfortable with what was going on? Like at least adult transition?
Would I be more comfortable? Wait, you mean if we said you cannot be, what do you mean exactly? If
somehow we could filter AGPs from the pool of transitioning adult males, and taking account, let's not even think about the minor. So if it just went away, I mean, this is a total
thought experiment, because obviously, so that if that category did not exist, if that
if that category
Okay.
did not exist, or if we had a really clear way of identifying them, like somehow, you know, like if there was something you put into somebody's brain and you can tell whether or not they're
Would I
ADD,
be more
whatever,
comfortable
hypothetical.
with
But
adults transition? I mean, I'm not uncomfortable with adults transitioning as it is. I don't care what people do. And I guess like for me, I'm not particularly threatened by AGPs. I mean, I'm not threatened by men anyway. Like, I'm not a great person to ask, and you probably aren't either, really. I mean, this is the other thing, is I think that like people get a little bit turned off of this argument because it's coming from the same place as like women are victims all the time. Like, you know, there's a lot of people like Julie Bindel and, you know, the sort of super turfs, and I say that affectionately. They are coming from and J.K. Rowling too will say things like it's never been a more dangerous time to be a woman. Like, J.K. Rowling is coming from a place of having been a victim of abuse, and a lot of the women in that conversation are very much their mentality is rooted in being a victim, and rightly so. So I think that one of the things that happens is that women who like to talk about agency and women should not be victims are very allergic to the conversation around being afraid of AGP people because it feels somehow intellectually dishonest. I think that's a huge element here. And I guess I would say I am one of those women that says that women should not think of themselves as victims as much as they perhaps do. And I am also somebody who says we need to know what AGP is and we need to be able to identify it. But I'm not sure I can answer your question, because I personally wouldn't. I personally don't feel threatened by an AGP person. Like, I wouldn't want them in my locker room, and I wouldn't want them like.
No, but would you be worried about the politics of all this? You know, forget about you personally, but like you as a political person who thinks
I'm
about
not
these
really.
issues and
Oh,
talks
you know
about
what?
these
I'm not
issues.
really okay. But then this is a good question. Like,
because I think you're motivated a lot by just the pediatric
but
let's
exactly.
take that out of the
so
question.
What is the politics of this? So then that's a good question. Is the politics of this spaces?
But like women's sports
spaces
would still be affected,
right?
For example, women's spaces, women's sports, women's
well,
hospitals,
I mean, I'm interested
hospital wards,
in
all of those
equality, right?
Be...
I mean, it's not women's sports is not fair because it's, first of all, it's physically unsafe for women to have to play against gigantic guys, and also they're denied their own, you know, championships, etc. Would I care about the politics? Yeah, I guess I would. But I guess I feel like the AGP thing, it's kind of like you can't socially engineer a proclivity out of somebody. So I guess I feel like it's better to be able to identify it, and so that there's a container. I mean, it's sort of like this, you know, you're not going to keep them from being autogonophiles. I mean, I know you're asking, what if this just didn't exist at all? Okay. So
I'm saying, what if this wasn't for some reason we were able to pull that element out of the discussion entirely? Like, would these politics still be?
I think they would be a lot less.
Would you still stand where you are?
I think it would be a lot less relevant.
I think we probably wouldn't be having the sports conversation.
Because they only get into the sports because of it. Well, some of them just want to win stuff.
Well, right, but that's a very, like, I mean,
it's pretty male.
It feels to me that this is just like getting into sports is just not something gay men are super inclined to do at any point. And then, you know, out of the biggest cases that I've seen of sports, like trans women in sports, every single one.
But do we? Okay, like but are we establishing that you are either a gay male type of trans person or an AGP, and that there is nothing in between? I mean, I
think there's probably a lot in between, but it's these are two, like, I think they're mutually exclusive for the most part. And there can be a lot of other things that play into both of those factors. Like, both of those factors you can have other things going on. Like, autism can be present and can be a part of the problem. But I think you know, my, you know, totally amateur analysis of this, I think I see a lot of the autism and AGP come together. Like, I think that those two play together, well, or create an environment in which AGP is more likely and then trans identification is more likely. But I don't think that that's necessarily the case of the gay, males, the gay homosexual boys who transition. I don't think that the autism rates.
No, I don't think there's an autism.
That's not a population that sees a lot of autism. Yeah. But you do see it in the girls. The girls who identify as trans seem to have higher rates of autism. So it's interesting, right? Like, and it's different. And I think the AGB population is unique. And they pose unique challenges because men, like, because of the sexual difference between men and women, and they pose a different kind of danger to women. I agree with you that I'm not personally super afraid of AGPs. I mean, I know AGPs. I'm not afraid of them. I treat them as if I treat male friends of mine, and I'm not afraid of the male friends of mine. So why would I be afraid necessarily of these people? But it's, I think what bothers me is that I didn't consent. I don't consent to be like, I don't care how somebody dresses in front of me, what they want to call themselves. I don't want to use the pronouns, because to me, the pronouns are, this is a lie and this is part of your fetish and I don't want to use it. If it's a lie, but it's not part of your fetish, then maybe I'll, case by case basis, we'll see. Like, what comes more naturally to me based on how they pass might be how I make the ruling in that case. But I think that the pronouns conversation is super insidious because it warps reality so intensely in our brains. Like, we have been speaking a gendered language for forever, like most human languages are gendered in one way or another, or find a way to invoke sex into the subject, because it has always been seen as that relevant, that it's not just a mere adjective to add into something, that it's often its own thing, because it changes the situation. What you're trying to communicate changes so much based on the sex of the person involved. And it's incredible that we think that it not only does it not matter, but that
it needs to be toppled.
Like, turning it around.
We've had enough
turning
of this.
It around
Human
is irrelevant.
Civilization is, we've taken this as far as it can go. That's what they'll say.
Even if you take this, even if you take this Artemis Langford case and you read some of the, you read that incredible final line of she says, but for now, Artemis collapsed on her bed. She felt hopeful for the first time in months. Maybe I can just be another student on campus, another regular sister in the Wyoming chapter of Kappa Kappa Gamma, she said. She didn't know what it would look like or feel like. Still alone in her dorm room, she started yelling with relief and excitement. Now, the she's are doing a lot of work. They are doing a lot of work, and it is a lie to pretend like it isn't. They're doing a. It's a different
I would
situation.
Like to know with the copy desk, if there's only any old geezers on the copy desks of the Washington Post. I mean, notably, there are no comments on this piece. Can you imagine if there were?
Still alone in his dorm room, he started yelling with relief and excitement. Like, it just makes for a different. It's a
bizarre, completely
picture.
Bizarre piece.
It is a different picture. And I think that it is absurd that we're pretending that not only does it's just a small thing, and that's what really gets me with the pronoun conversation, that this is the smallest you can. Why can't you just give them this, huh? It doesn't mean these are just words. Just like get a new, it's a habit. So get a new habit, and it'll change things. It is a lie. I don't say that because it paints a different picture in my head of what is happening. And it paints a different picture in everybody's head of what is happening. So until we can, erase like the English language and our memory and understanding of the English language in our memory, in our heads, start over, I don't want to use these pronouns that are
I hear
being
you,
dishonest
but they want
about
to
a
be
situation.
post-gender. You're on the wrong side of history. Look, their argument is that all these things that you're saying that's the baseline experience for most of people and has been throughout human civilization, but there are lots of ways in which society is still backwards and we need to move past it. I mean, this is very utopian. It's a way of thinking that is fundamentally academic. Like, it is a big thought experiment that has just been taken.
It's sort of like way of thinking it, that words make reality, and it is not true.
It's like
It is not true.
Right. No, and this is just something that started like in critical studies programs. This is Judith Butler. This is something that philosophers were kicking around and thinking about as thought experiments, and like and that's fine. And you can argue whether or not like they meant to apply this to actual life to the extent that it has now been applied. I don't know. I wouldn't give academics and deconstructionalists as much deconstructionists as much credit as that. They're not exactly twirling their mustaches trying to overthrow civilization. They just want to fuck around with their dissertations and with each other. But some would disagree with me.
But I think that what it is here is that it when you take away gender from the equation, or you switch it around the way that they do, you actually make our discourse less not just less accurate, but you cripple our ability to talk about things as they are. And you create a disconnect between what exists on the ground and what we are saying. And you can talk about this more broadly as what you point out, just this like kind of obsession of a certain groups of people who really, really seem to care about the words we use and why we use them and feel that it's extremely relevant. I don't think it's irrelevant, but I don't think words create reality. I don't think they're spells. This is why I don't like the euphemism treadmill either. I don't like that I can't say certain curse words because they're bad now, but I can still reference the same stigma in other ways. It just seems like a really stupid exercise, and I don't want to partake. But people obviously feel this way, and these people are crippling our ability to talk about reality as it is. And it makes me very nervous, because then you can't point to, even if let's say they get what they want and they are working, like gender activists are working towards this, where they are trying to, like in various countries and contexts, they're trying to eliminate biological sex being recorded when it comes to crimes, or just that you can switch it on your ID or on your certificate or on the court documents that matter. And so we're going to see more and more crimes that are typically male crimes that are being committed by females, or Fs on their, whatever document, but they are not females. They're not female crimes, and that there are going to be consequences to that too. We treat men and women different in a lot of contexts, in a lot of important contexts. We look funny at, young, like a 21-year-old boy who applies to be, an assistant at a daycare. We think, I don't know about that, buddy. Like,
and it's unfortunate.
I don't know about this. Something about this is weird.
This is another conversation, but a lot of people are arguing that we need to change that. And a lot of what's going on with crisis of young,
these people don't care about kids.
Is
that's why
they don't have male,
because they don't care about kids,
right?
Well, I mean, they need masculinity. I think men don't need to be in daycares. They need to.
They could be third grade teachers.
They need to
Let's start there. But yeah, no, I know.
I don't know.
Talk to Richard Reeves about that.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
sure. They could be a little bit old. Richard Reeves, I think he has some interesting insights to this, but and he does talk about the reality of gender. And when we're talking about older kids, it becomes different. And older young men, we get into a different realm, and we should treat males who are in those environments as different. But daycare, toddlers.
Well, kids shouldn't be in daycare anyway, Sarah. Why are we even platforming daycare like this? It shouldn't even be discussed, because it needs to be gotten rid of.
It's true.
I think that the kids should stay in utero for like an extra 2 years. They shouldn't even be born. They should stay within the mother if you were really going to commit to being a trad.
I wonder if that would be
full
easier.
trad stays pregnant for 3 years minimum.
I think that would. You would be huge.
Yeah, but literally, you'd be huge, but you would be.
But literally,
no,
yeah,
if you want to,
or maybe we should develop like a kangaroo flap.
Yes, that's
something we could probably
engineered.
Build in.
This, oh my god, this is a tech thing. This is like a transhumanist trad empire. Because if you are really going to fully commit to being trad, you need to commit to being pregnant for, I'd say, minimum 2 years, maybe 4 to 5. With the same fetus.
I agree.
They should really have like Head Start, like early kindergarten in utero. There's ways to do this. You could homeschool still in the womb. Womb school.
Yeah.
The One Womb Schoolhouse.
Aww.
Okay. Let's work on that.
Yeah.
Let's patent that because I don't want anyone to steal that. That's going to pay. That's going to pay for my teleprompter so I can see the screen. Okay. Have we covered everything? What do they need to know? We had a great hangout with our founding members the other day.
We did.
Really smart group.
Yeah, they're fun guys. Like I gals and guys. I mean guys in the neutral sense. Should I just say gals and that can be
girlx? It's girlx. There was men and women there, and they're great.
They were nice. Yeah, they were fun. Yeah, I like that group. Yeah, and it was lots of interesting conversations as usual. I heard a lot about. I don't think that much about men and how much they have to control themselves.
We don't want to tell tales. That was a private conversation. But
we're not going to.
We did have some. It was fun. Some candid sharing, some radical vulnerability.
It was great. Yeah.
So
learning experience.
So people should join the Substack at aspecialplace.substack.com and become a paying subscriber because they're getting 2 entirely separate episodes every month. We're killing ourselves.
Yeah. Literally just exhausted all the time. Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone.
See you next time.